Last time we have saw async, await, and features, how they work. Inshallah, in this video we are going to take things more seriously. We want to try to look at some APIs. This is why I have looked at so many APIs, and I have found this one. And the ones that I have looked for mostly are ones that doesn't require authentication, so we don't lose so much time authenticating, etc. And it is free. So I have found this free service here that every time that you call this endpoint, it gives you a random user. But before we jump into Flutter, I want that you really understand how APIs work, and I want just to give you an overview with another important application that a lot of people use with when working with API, when they want to access API before they start the development process. So if they want to test an API, they use this software here that is called Postman. It is free, and yeah, so let's go check it out. Okay, we have the download here. If you want, you can try Postman on the web. I'm not pretty sure, but probably before Postman, 5 years ago, it was I think around 5 years ago, it was an extension of Google, so probably you will find it. But in my case, I prefer to download it. So we can create an application. So if you want to go ahead and create an application, you can do it, or you can click here on skip and go to the app. For now, I am doing this. So we want to go into new, and here on blocks go into HTTP request, and we just have to paste our URL that we can copy from here. So let me a little bit so you can easily see what's going on. Okay, so let me copy this API. Basically here I want to paste my URL. When we call APIs, we have different verbs, and I don't want to make to spend a lot of time around this thing here, because there are many tutorials. If you want me to do a specific tutorials about the HTTP protocol verbs, I can do it, but for now, thing that you have to know is that you have many ways to call an API, and we are going to look for the get. This get verb here, it is the same that is accessible when you type on your URL bar. For example, when you go right here, in this way you are doing a get request. So it is the same thing when you visit a website, you are doing a get request. Basically, you are asking to get some results, and as you can see here, we already get a random user, Miss Emily Allen or Ollen, I don't know. And yeah, okay. And in our case, we are looking for get, and basically you are calling an endpoint, and as I explained in the previous videos, you are calling a server. And as I said before, this is only an API, an interface. So you are just calling an interface, and it doesn't really matter the programming language that they are using. The only thing that you know is that you want to call these results to get some results, and this is what we are doing. And You can have many endpoints. In our case, there is only this one, and inshallah, we're going to see other ones. But you may have other things like users or products or other things. And it is the backend that defines what endpoints are and how many and what they give back when you call them. And even the verbs, they define the type of verbs that they want. So you may call a GET request and do a delete, but it depends on the server and the developers that do the backend. So the reason why it doesn't matter the programming language, because there are two distinct things and they work together in this way. You call the API and from your perspective that you're using Flutter as a front end, it doesn't matter to you if it is made with PHP or other things. So now let's go ahead and call this API. And as you can see here, we have our result. And now we are not going to see query parameters, but when you are calling an endpoint, you can send some parameters, and you have different ways to sending them, if it is GET or POST or other types of requests. In our case, when calling this API, we are getting back a JSON response. As you can see here, we have set as default JSON, but you can have other requests, for example, XML, HTML, text, etc. The most used ones are JSON and XML. My preferred one is JSON because it is lightweight and easy to understand, but JSON and XML have their pros and cons. And here we have our information that we want to access, and this is the result. When we call this endpoint, the server, we get back all this information that we can use in our Flutter application or any client application. In our case, it will be a Flutter application. So if we tap again on send, we will get another result. As you can see, gender female, and if you do it again, etc., etc., because every time that we make a request, we get back a different result. So this application is used so you can test your API in different ways without wasting your time developing the programming part. Just like when you do some design before coding or wireframing before the design, it will easy things for you. And it is used for testing your API too. So let's go ahead and try this API with Flutter. So here I have deleted everything and I have left only the material app, the scaffold, and I am calling my app that it doesn't exist at the moment. So let's create a stateless widget. No, let's create a stateful widget called my app. Okay, we are good. Now it is calling an existing widget. Now to use async and await, the thing that we want to do is to install the HTTP package, and we don't have it into our pubspec.yaml. I'm going to use the terminal, or you can add it as you wish. So Flutter pub add HTTP. So we have just added our package. Now we are good. Yes. We have few ways to work, so we can work with features with Flutter. The thing is that if we want to use async await, we cannot define a body of a widget async await. We can do it inside a function, or we have another way of doing it. For example, using then and calling an async function, or we can, if we want to use them inside a widget, we can use FutureBuilder. Now let's go ahead and delete this, for example, this one here. Okay, yes. Now let's type init state. As you know, init state begins the first time that you call the stateful widget, and it begins init state. And here we cannot use async await inside init state, but we can use another thing that it is like if you are using async await, and it is really important, and it is called then. And what we want to do is we want to create an async function that we, for example, can call get random username. And basically, we want to use the syntax here. But before going ahead, let's create our function by defining it outside, just so it's more clear. And we want to return a future. So we define that it is a future, that it returns a future, and the name, random username. And we want to be it to be an async function. So we do like this, and let's create a variable so we can put the information of our user, and we want to use the await keyword, so we wait for the HTTP call. And here we want to use the package that we have just installed, and to do so we should import it. So HTTP package TP as HTTP. Now let's go ahead. Okay, HTTP read, because in our case we can do many operation with the HTTP package. In our case, we want to read the informations that are inside our endpoint, and we use URI so we can parse the URL. So let's copy the endpoint, paste it here. So when using read, you should pass to it an URI, and you cannot pass a string. So this we are going to use this parser here, that it is inside the URI. The URI that is the method parse. And then yeah, let's go ahead and return our user info. And obviously after after those the API call, it saves the informations here, and it returns it here, and we are returning a future. So this is the reason why we need async await here. We should use async await, but as I said before, inside init state you cannot use async await. So the workaround is, well, as I said before, we have two ways: or we use a FutureBuilder here, or we use the then, and inside then you pass to it anonymous function, anonymous callback, that it gets called when the information is returned. And here we will have the data that after the future resolves, it will give us the data back inside here. So it is like if you are using async and you're seeing a wait for the data. When you get the data back, you get it here, basically. Since you're using then the future waits for the future that gets resolved, and when it gets resolved, you will get back your informations. And now let's create variables so we can save our decoded data. So basically, we want to transform our data from JSON to map. So we use this function here that is called JSON decode, and we call this user data value here, and yeah, it should auto import it. Quick fix import Dart convert library. That is this one here. Now let's here. Okay. So after getting back our data, we want to access, for example, the name. But basically, let me first show you print for the data. Can do it. Okay, now we can go ahead and try to run this one here. So as you can see, this is our data transformed as a map, and here we have our data that it is a string, that it is a JSON object, and so we transform it to a map so we are able to read it in Flutter easily. Okay, now we can stop here. Can go ahead. Not important. So let's delete this print here. Now, the thing that we want to do is we want to get our name. So basically, the name that I have got it from here. So we want to access our name. So we have to go inside results. As you can see, this object and gets transformed in a map, and we are able to access the result. And since here we have an array of other objects, we want to access the number 0 that it contains this other data that we are interested in. Thing is that we want the name, the first name and the last name, but the most important thing is that we can get the name, so we can extract the first and the last name. And yeah, so let's do it right now. Okay, our name. So as I said, we have to access the coded data, and we are now able to access results 0 and name. So as I have said here, results 0, because we want, since this is an array, we want the first object, and name, result 0 name. And then from here we can access the first and the last name. So let's go back to our code. Here we have name, and now we want to store our data. For example, we could say string username. Okay. And here, for example, we want to create a center and a text that is showing the username. I forgot to type child. Okay, that's it. Here we want to show our username as a string, and now we want to type username and want to type the name, want to access the first name and the last name. as we have just right here, we are here, we have all this data right here, and we want to access the first and the last name. Let's go back here. So after doing so, we can set state, so we are able to update our state. Can do, oops, we can do this operation right here. It is the same. Okay, now let's save. Where is the simulator? As you can see now, basically we are calling this data from here, from the API. We are returning it back. We are using async await. We're returning it back. And here with then we are showing the result. Now, if we refresh again, we will see a new result. And here it is. So now we are really calling a real service, and this is the way that you should work with it. And as I said, you have two main ways to use it with widgets. For example, with then or with FutureBuilder. Now let's comment out this part here because we want, let's refresh and see our empty terminal data. Now we want to use FutureBuilder. Okay, good. FutureBuilder. Okay. And here we want, let's first define a future that it is our get random username, and our builder that we want to call with context a snapshot. Basically here we are we are getting back our context, and the snapshot is the result of our get random username. It is just like here when you get user data, but you have more information about the call. For example, you have information, for example, if it has an error or the connection state and things like that. So for example, you can show an indicator that it is loading, and you have many other things. Here we want to return back our text, the username. And before we turn, let's take a look at snapshot and what we have inside it. You can see we have a connection state waiting. In our case, we can show an indicator of loading if we want, or we can just pass it. But okay, let's do it just for fun. Snapshot dot connection state, if it is equal connection state at waiting. That means that we want to return a circular later. Otherwise, we want to return our text. Now, let's save. You can see we have the process indicator, and now after a few seconds it stopped here in our breakpoint, and inside the snapshot we now have our data because the connection state is done. So basically you can do the same things that we have done right here. copy. I mean, why I have to lose my time writing the same stuff, right? Okay. But here, instead of user data, we want to use okay. We want to use snapshot.data, and we want to transform it to string because it is an object in our case, but you have easy ways to do it. Now we just want to go fast for now, and it will do basically the same things, but right now, instead of calling setState, we just have to return back our username. Okay, now let's save. It will format for us. Now let's run this again. It is showing our indicator and then the data. But if we want, we can omit this snapshot here. And yeah, let's try again. Showing the indicator, then the data. Showing the indicator because it is a future and it takes time to make this HTTP call and get back the data. So that's it. Thank you so much. If this video helped, please subscribe and leave a like. And yeah, hope to see you the next time, inshallah. And thank you so much for watching.